Well, thank you so much for joining us here on AccuWeather Weekend. I'm Bree.
And I'm Constanzer. As we head through this weekend, we're talking about two different things here. We're talking about hurricane season and all of the severe weather that we've been getting.
Yeah, it's a lot that we're covering for you. So with that, we're going to start you right off with a quick look at satellite and radar, just to kind of get a feel of what's happening across the country. And, well, most of that action right in the nation's midsection.
Yep, that's where we're talking about some of the showery weather still trying to slide its way east towards the Appalachians. Meanwhile, the Central Plains, we've had a lot of thunderstorms, most of them falling apart. But if you've entered in Nebraska, some of those are still pretty strong.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen some charged up storms here early through our Saturday. Heads up, we are still tracking that threat of severe weather
of the Mississippi Valley into the high plains this weekend. And the severe weather threat extends actually right through Tuesday, with the Midwest dealing with some of the worst risk for tornadoes.
Yeah, Tuesday is looking to be a pretty nasty day. Now, the main threat today will be supercell thunderstorms, which can generate hail to the size of baseballs, as well as high wind gusts. A small number of the storms can also produce brief tornadoes. We're breaking it all down for you, so let's start you off. Week, though, right now you're at 63. For our Saturday, we have some action to talk about here across the north central. We have our storm that's going to bring some wet weather, or continue to bring that wet weather right across the Midwest. Now, we do have some storms that Melissa was breaking down for you just a little while ago across the plains. Storms possible, or at least more numerous in terms of coverage, as opposed to talking about in the yellow. But in the yellow, anywhere that is shaded in a color could see severe weather, could see a strong storm. So heads up for hail, isolated tornadoes, and localized damaging wind gusts. Your accurate local storm max holds at 80 miles per hour. Now, I want to show you how this is all going to play out. Still tracking this Sunday night. It's this line that has me concerned. Look at how this line is taking shape. You can kind of see it bowing out like a bow and arrow. That tells me that winds are going to be a high concern, but also not going to rule out if you like.
Welcome back to AccuWeather Weekend. The Atlantic hurricane season officially kicks off today. The season is likely to be much worse than last year, and that's why AccuWeather leads hurricane expert Alex De Silva is sounding an alarm. From storm surge to strong winds, hurricanes and tropical storms can have a devastating impact. And to better measure a storm strength, AccuWeather has developed the Real Impact Scale for hurricanes. AccuWeather's Lincoln Riddle explains. All great hits. Keep in mind, as we go through this hurricane season, we talked about that above historical average hurricane season that's likely. And just look at the exclusive AccuWeather forecast. You can see a lot of these numbers start near or above where average is. So we're looking at 20 to 25 named storms. Historical average is around 14. And 8 to 12 hurricanes, historical average around 7. Of course, there's also some major hurricanes. And with all of these storms, none of that really tells you whether or not those storms will work their way into land, especially the U.S. coastline. So that's why we wanted to show you a little bit of the direct impacts here, 4 to 6. Given that we have a higher than average season, it is likely to see a few more of these storms impact land, but the weather pattern will ultimately depict that and describe that. Above historical average here for named storms, hurricanes, about more major hurricanes too. Category 3 or higher, 111 mile per hour sustained winds. So that would be major hurricane status. Storms like Ian, you'll recall, certainly have some of those lasting memories with how powerful some of these major hurricanes can be. And so this is why we want you to, again, stay prepared. And part of the reason why we'll get all of this, again, is because there's going to be the potential for more storms, and Texas, as well as the Florida Panhandle, portions of South Florida and the Carolinas seem a bit more likely to have some of those direct U.S. impacts than some other portions of the coast, for example, Northeast Florida, for example. As we go through time, you can actually identify here this week what we're talking about is a boundary into some of the Atlantic, not quite into the Caribbean, south of the Gulf here, that will have some impacts as far as where all the moisture will be setting up. We actually, this time of year, often get what we call gyres forming near the Yucatan and in towards Central America. That's areas of showers and thunderstorms that are really greatly disturbed and keep the wet weather there. As we get pieces of energy to kind of work off, they'll drift across this boundary. The question is, does anything actually set up into low pressure system? It's unlikely, but we do know there will be some wet times here as tropical development. So that's some good news here as we talk about this pattern for the hurricane season has officially began. And we are going to continue to watch it through the months to come.
Well, we are tracking days of severe weather, and we're going to start you off on Sunday because unfortunately some of these storms are going to turn a little bit stronger and a little bit more severe. The area that we're highlighting for our Sunday afternoon to Sunday night is going to stretch across the northern plains all the way down through the Texas Panhandle, with a moderate risk setting up through Fargo, Sioux Falls, up and down that I-29 corridor essentially. That means that we're talking about a little bit more in coverage in the orange area when it comes to severe storms. Hail, isolated tornadoes, though we can't forget about those winds, and winds are going to be important here. We're gusting anywhere between 60 to 70 miles per hour. Wouldn't be surprised if we saw wind reports as high as 80 miles per hour with your AccuWeather local Storm Max. I do want to start us off for our Sunday because it's not that bad up to the Lone Star State. As for Tuesday, though, we have another severe thunderstorm setup. We have warm and very moist air shooting northward out of the Gulf. Severe thunderstorms set to erupt here as that warm and moist air meets up with that cooler and wind.
Atlantic hurricane season 2024 is upon us, and that means we're going to be keeping a lot closer of an eye on the tropics. Not that we weren't before, but you know, it just gets into the more favorable time of year for activity. And this year we are looking at 20 to 25 named storms. So that's going to be the whole list, the whole shebang of storms. And what we are forecasting is well above historical average of just 14. 8 to 12 hurricanes, 4 to 7 major hurricanes. And with all of this activity, more in the form of named storms, it's not surprising that we are expecting more in the way of direct U.S. impacts. Ultimately, though, with these storms, you still have to have the right weather conditions to push them into land. So it depends on when they occur and when they form and what the weather environment is. As we look, though, above historical average for the named storms, hurricanes, and major hurricanes, maybe even coming close to that 30 named storms that we saw in 2020. Hopefully not, but it's a pax. The good news is at the moment we aren't really starting off with much in the way of activity. We do have a lot of wet weather still holding on here across the Caribbean, and it is near a frontal boundary, so we will be keeping a close eye on this region of the Atlantic as we head through the upcoming days, but still very unlikely that we find any tropical formation. So some very good news as you look across the southern Atlantic and Caribbean, but we'll keep a close eye on it in the days to come.